sent Representative Park Cannon to jail after they say she repeatedly knocked on the door as the governor signed the elections bill into law.
She now faces 2 felony charges. Fox 5's Brian Hill is live outside the state capitol right now. Brian, what is Cannon saying about her arrest?
Well, she says she had the right to be in that room with the governor and that the governor shouldn't have the privilege of privacy signing legislation like Senate Bill 202. This was the scene as troopers removed Representative Park Cannon from the Capitol in handcuffs Thursday. She spoke on WAOK's Rashad Ritchie Morning Show Friday following her arrest.
As a representative, I have an obligation to Georgia voters who will be negatively impacted by this legislation to be in the room.
The representative was outside the governor's office at the Capitol with a small group of protesters who opposed the controversial elections reform bill. As the governor was speaking inside, the state patrol tells us Cannon repeatedly knocked on the door. The GSP tells us they told Cannon to stop knocking more than once and warned her that she'd be arrested if she continued.
He should not be afforded the privilege of privacy when he is in the commission of such a heinous act intended to divest the Black citizens of this state of their right to vote.
This is Park Cannon's mugshot from Thursday's arrest. She was booked inside the Fulton County Jail on felony obstruction of law enforcement and disrupting General Assembly sessions charges.
I was unlawfully arrested because I was knocking on the governor's door to be in attendance as he signed Senate Bill 202, which we know to be a racially motivated voter suppression bill.
You can see here as the press conference came to an abrupt end during the commotion.
The issue is the people's business was being conducted behind closed doors. You know, we don't see, it's very rare that you sign a bill of that magnitude behind closed doors.
Cannon's attorney, Gerald Griggs, says he has serious concerns about her arrest.
I'm gravely concerned by the arrest because, you know, the Georgia Constitution provides that elected officials shall be free from arrest while the session is in turn. So we believe the Constitution protects her. We don't believe any of her actions were felonious.
This wasn't Cannon's first run-in at the Capitol. Last month, she clashed with troopers during a protest over the voting bill. Now the State Patrol tells...
And it's egregious how far the people in power will go to maintain their grip on that power.
Representative Cannon now faces 2 felony charges, including obstruction and disrupting the General Assembly session. Many folks telling Fox 5 they're deeply disappointed by law enforcement.
The bill that her chambers just voted on that morning.
Now, investigators tell Fox 5 that Representative Cannon was charged with obstruction because she stomped on an officer's foot. She has since been released on bond. Reporting from Atlanta City Hall tonight, Elizabeth Rollins, Fox 5 News.
Director says it wasn't rocket science to know they would have to take their fight against the new elections law to court. Her organization and 2 others are the plaintiffs in a lawsuit attorneys filed just hours after Governor Brian Kemp signed the controversial Election Integrity Act of 2021 into law.
With Senate Bill 202, Georgia will take another step toward ensuring our elections are secure, accessible, and fair.
The measure requires ID for absentee ballots, limits ballot drop box hours, and bans people from providing food or water to voters waiting in line to cast their ballots, though it does expand weekend early voting. Attorneys challenging the new law
behind all of these changes at the state level. Is it even possible to separate the two?
Well, this is what happens when people who can't win a fair election try to rig the rules to make it harder for eligible citizens to vote. This is what you see happening, and it is a racist logic. It is an old tradition in this country of targeting policies that we know disproportionately impact Black and brown voters. We know that Black and brown voters, for example, are less likely to have a government-issued photo identification. And yet, this is the way that systemic racism so often works today. It's also true that when you look at white Americans, who are young, white Americans who are low income. 1 out of 5 of them don't have a photo ID issued by the government. And yet, are they any less eligible citizens with the right to vote? The idea of voter fraud is something that happens 0.00003% of our elections. And yet it is a big lie. Instead, we have the For the People Act that actually could address this creeping corruption in our democracy, whether it's the big flood of secret money, the partisan gerrymandering, or this desire to rig the rules so that eligible citizens can't vote. And the only way the Republicans can justify what is a bipartisan, actually, majority of the American people support the provisions of the For the People Act. The only way the Republicans can justify opposing it and these 250 unpopular laws at the state level is with this big lie.
Nikki, one of your day jobs for us is as a consumer reporter, and I look at these votes.
Why NBC News launched this whole planyourvote.com to help walk people through every state. It's something different. I lived in so many states over the past 20 years as a journalist, and there's no centralized way of registering for your ballot. Sometimes you do it at the DMV. Sometimes you got to mail it in. It's confusing at best for someone who's tuned in and paying attention. We also know that the data shows people of color are disproportionately affected by restrictive or changes to a voter access, right? The barriers are already very high. So you look at the Brennan Center. They found black voters actually wait on average 45 minutes longer in line to vote. Latino voters 46 minutes longer than white voters just to cast a ballot in person. On the surface, you think, what's wrong with having to show an ID? We show an ID for so many things to verify who we are. But listen to Heather's point. The amount of voter fraud used to justify the need for an ID, which is hard to get, which can cost money, which sometimes requires people to produce a birth certificate. There are all these hoops that people have to jump through. And as Heather pointed out, so many people support access, making it easier for the voter, making it easier for the consumer. And also, you said, Chuck, the optics on this are not good. Georgia passing 89 pages of voter reform after losing those 2 positions. What does that tell you about what's really at the crux of this?
Well,
although they did add a couple of days of weekend voting, which is good.
Right. Well, Al Cardenas, our home state of Florida, the governor bragged about the voting system, and yet they're changing it. Why?
Yeah. Well, look, these 20-some voter reform laws being proposed in all of these states are all about providing cotton candy to the far-right base that believe the Donald Trump big lie about the elections being fraudulent. That's all that is. In reality, and I agree with Heather and I agree with Vicky, but look, most of the voter suppression takes place under the radar. For example, in Georgia, minority voters had to wait 8 more times than white voters in their particular voting precincts because there are less voting machines, less employees, less people to help out in the process. Most of the voter suppression that takes place is run under the radar of laws and so forth. Yes, I agree that we need to have a revamp of a Voting Rights Act. If it was timely in the 60s, it's even more timely now. But you need to look more at voter suppression at the local level. That's where it really hits hard.
An important point there. Peter Baker, I want to just...
The person on Meet the Press said, you got to jump through all these hoops. Well, I had to jump through those hoops to get my ID. I suggest you do the same. And where's this? They say 1 in 5 people don't have IDs. Well, they must not have a job and have a check they have to cash every week to get their money. What are they, where do they live? Are they people that, are not one of these folks that have to be taken care of due to their, mental disabilities, that prevent them from being able to function in life as a person, as a person versus a person that can. Those must be the 1 in 5 people that don't have IDs.
pandemic of crime in Atlanta. And while the people who make the laws for the state of Georgia may not live full-time in Atlanta, they spend plenty of time here under the Gold Dome, and they have been touched by crime.
Sadly, the facts paint a chilling reality.
Even the second most powerful official in the state is discussing what's top of mind for so many Atlanta residents, the crime issue. Today, a stunning announcement under the Gold Dome.
To hold hearings over the summer to investigate this urgent problem and determine if state intervention may be necessary.
Why focus on Atlanta? Well, the Speaker David Ralston candidly acknowledged his colleagues have been touched directly by the periodic surges in crime.
Chairman Cooper's car got stolen last night.
An example, here's surveillance video of lawmaker Sharon Cooper's car being targeted by a now common slider thief.
Normally, it would fall to a city's mayor and police force to address this issue. Again, as many of you have reported, nearly 200 Atlanta police officers quit or were fired last year.
He made it clear that he feels that the city is losing control.
And that is Council President Felicia Moore, who holds the number 2 slot at Atlanta City Hall. How might the city respond to the provocative step by the Speaker?
I know the state has partnered with the city, particularly in light of the street racing and other things. I would love to see it remain a partnership versus some sort of intervention, and I'm not quite clear the definition of that.
The council president says she'd welcome more state boots on the ground to help Atlanta officers, but the idea of a takeover? No. As far as the mayor, we've contacted her office. So far, no response. From Northeast Atlanta, I'm Morris Diggs, Fox 5 News.
Car, so we didn't want to be caught in like armor. It was kind of scary and shocking. Definitely looked like, I thought it was like a drug or like a gun bust.
Scary moments for shoppers at Atlantic Station Wednesday afternoon as they tried to figure out what was going on.
It's really scary knowing that you can't really go anywhere outside your house and you have to be worried about getting shot.
According to Atlanta police, 22-year-old Rico Marley went into the Publix at Atlantic Station with body armor, 2 long guns, and 3 handguns. A witness saw Marley with a rifle and told an employee who then notified police. Atlanta police also confirmed crews were investigating a suspicious package at the same location, but did not confirm whether they were related. Publix, a portion of the parking garage attached to the grocery store, and stores were closed as police blocked off the area for their investigation. Shoppers say the recent shooting in Atlanta and in Colorado have them on high alert.
It's scary, you know, because you're looking at just simple daily tasks that you don't think anything of, like just my daughter and I just out shopping. The last thing we're thinking about is a bomb threat. We're walking, trying to shop, trying to figure out something to eat, and it's like, okay, so just in that instant, we really, if it was an actual threat, we really could have been taken out and not even knowing, what was going on.
The frantic scene. Fox 5's Angelique Proctor has details.
The judge said in open court today that Rico Marley is a danger to our community. We learned today that 22-year-old is unemployed and was arrested back in 2018 for theft by receiving stolen property in DeKalb County.
And it has dealt with immigrant traffic for decades now.
It's always been here, and I was born and raised here. So back in the day when I was growing up, we'll have 1 or 2 swing by the house, you know, grab his water, whatever, and continue. Now we're looking at like vast of them, you know, in terms of 15, 20, 30 of them.
The Brooks County Sheriff's Office is host to a number of seized vehicles that get processed, then either go back to the owner or become government property based on what the district attorney calls for. Now, there has to be thousands of these seized vehicles on the Brooks County Sheriff's Office property. Most of them have been used for what's known as bailouts. A bailout includes a vehicle carrying immigrants.
Usually on the average, they carry between 10 to 15 of them on the average. They'll drive up north as far as they can. When they see police presence, they're just going to get to the fence as close as they can, if not break it, and then everyone runs out. That's a bailout.
Martinez says the county also sees a lot of drop-offs. That's, of course, when cars drop off immigrants. He says his county is right in the middle of the entire immigration crisis, and it's exhausting his resources.
And that's pretty much constant. You know, at one time here, I think we were having probably 5 pursuits almost simultaneously. Had to go in different directions. So that's difficult.
He adds the smugglers always learn what law enforcement is doing, and then they shift their strategies. I'm Frank McCaffrey reporting.
Warned of consequences if tensions escalate. And now the North are calling his comments a provocation and an encroachment on their right to self-defense. They're also vowing to continuously expand their military power to combat what they say are threats from the U.S. and South Korea.
Suez Canal that's more than 1,300 feet long and weighs 200,000 tons. The container ship, the Ever Given, is stuck sideways in a single-lane stretch, blocking all ships from passing. Teams from around the world are being flown in to help, including the U.S. Navy, who is sending engineers who are experts in dredging.
We have equipment and capacity that most countries don't have, and we're seeing what we can be, what help we can be.
Tugboats are trying to remove sand from underneath. If that doesn't work, crews are considering removing cargo to lighten the ship's load. More than 200 vessels are stuck waiting for this ship to be moved. Late shipments because of the coronavirus pandemic
Take the
are
cargo
only adding
off.
to the problem.
So the longer this lasts, the higher the risk that we're going to see massive congestion problems in the European ports, say a week to 2 weeks from now.
The Suez Canal is an artificial channel that cuts through Egypt. It allows ships to pass from the
all across the county. But parents from one middle school say the school district should be doing much better with in-person instruction at this point.
There was no teacher interaction, no one standing up front teaching as if they were in a traditional classroom.
Christy Gage says in-person instruction isn't measuring up to what she and her 7th grade son had hoped for at Henderson Middle School. She says he was initially excited about the option of face-to-face learning when DeKalb County reopened school buildings a few weeks ago, but that changed quickly.
After the first day, he didn't want to go back.
Why not?
He said that, and another student told me as well, that it was just like being at home. The interaction was the same. Any questions they had to go through their Chromebook.
Well, who did you reach out to and what did they say?
I reached out to the principal first because it was our home school, obviously, and she proceeded to tell me that that was how they were instructed to do.
After further inquiries, Gage says she received this email from Area Superintendent Trent Arnold. In it, Arnold apologized for Gage's frustration and disappointment and said, in part, in order for both in-person and virtual students to participate and be fully engaged, the use of electronic devices must be utilized for all students. The DeKalb parent says she and other parents just wish their students could raise their hands and ask questions the old-fashioned way.
Now, the CDC has recommended 3 feet is sufficient. I believe that they should be able to have more students in the classroom, which would help the teachers who want to teach face-to-face.
The school district responded to Fox 5's inquiry with a statement saying, in part, the purpose is not to replicate the traditional classroom experience. Instead, think about the lessons teachers have taught in a traditional classroom setting and reimagine how they can adapt them into innovative teaching.
I really hate it for the teachers because I know that they're working hard with their hands tied, and I'm grateful for that, but we'll just take it week by week.
Portia Bruner.
I'm excited about that. And I would say 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, whether we do this again or not, that if you were part of it in some way, you're going to look back at essentially March the 28th, 2021 and go, you know what? That was a pretty special day.
Drivers. The planned truck race on dirt moved from this evening to tomorrow, and the Cup Series race is still slated for 3:30 tomorrow on Fox 5. So to preview this even more unpredictable race tomorrow,